Hamilton, now at Ferrari, dares to dream of a record 8th F1 world title. The Tifosi will be hoping the Brits can bring glory back to Italy. To many, Ferrari and Formula One are inseparable. They're the only team in the sport today to have competed in the first World Championship in 1950, are the most successful team in history and have built some absolutely gorgeous cars. Their first driver's title was won in 1952 by Alberto Ascari. Considered one of F1's most dominant and best-loved champions, he drove the iconic Ferrari 500 and defended his title the year after. It was Juan Manuel Fangio in his Ferrari 250 who secured the team's next driver's title in 1956. Remember, he was world champion 5 times with 4 different teams. Mike Hawthorne, Phil Hill and John Surtees also won titles for Ferrari in the 50s and 60s, and the cars back then were beautiful, and they even sounded great, didn't they? Anyway, Ferrari went 11 years without winning a title until Niki Lauda won in 1975 in the iconic 312T. Throughout much of the 80s and 90s, though, Ferrari looked like they'd never go all the way again. Le Professeur Alain Prost came pretty close in 1990, but lost out to his bitter rival and former teammate at McLaren, Ayrton Senna. It was only when John Todt recruited a swathe of staff from outside of Italy, including Michael Schumacher, that the glory days returned 21 years after their last driver's title. The turn of the century saw the prancing horse sprint to an unprecedented 5 consecutive championship doubles. And after Schumacher left, Kimi Raikkonen reclaimed the driver's title immediately. But despite employing 1,500 people, the Iceman remains the last Ferrari world champion. So, 16 constructors' titles, 7 more than McLaren, and 15 drivers' titles, 4 more than, again, McLaren. Ferrari are truly Formula One's top team. Forza Ferrari.
Yeah, welcome everybody to tonight's different, curtailed and slightly later edition of Trans-Europe Express here on talkSPORT. It's shorter, but it's no less packed. During the course of, I'm Danny Kelly, and during the course of the next 2 hours, Andy Brassell here with us as always, and joining in the strange things I now do for those of you watching the show as well as listening. In fact, I play the Kraftwerk music with my fingers. I can't play a note of real music, but I enjoy playing I can. We've got loads to get through in those 2 hours. We'll bring you all the major stories from across the continent. In the second hour of the show, Andy's got some big stories there for you. We'll have, of course, reaction to Chelsea 3, PSG 0, and Chelsea winning the Club World Cup. We'll review the Club World Cup and what it means for next year's World Cup as well. We'll also be paying some attention to the Women's Euros. England thrashing Wales this evening, making their way through to the next round. Uma Gurav will join us for that. And, of course, Tim Vickery will join us from South America to explain why a Brazilian club didn't win the Club World Cup. Welcome along one, welcome along all to Trans-Europe Express. Good evening, Andy. How are you?
Evening, Danny. I'm well, and you?
Really, really good. A little bit sunburnt. The hottest day of the year here in Southern Ireland, and that's the day I decided, for reasons that I cannot explain, that I needed to paint a garden wall that has stood there naked and breeze-blocked for the past 2 years. But that's the way life works, isn't it? So I'm a lovely, lovely lobster pink now. But, Andy, it's been an extraordinary and exhausting day of sport as well. The cricket, the tennis, the Tour de France, and that awful business where the cyclist who had been leading for 174 of the 175 kilometres was caught with 800 metres to go by the voracious and shark-like punch. But I suppose the most recent thing we have to talk about, and bringing the, say, amazing sporting day to an end, is that Chelsea have won the Club World Cup. They are the world champions, if you want to follow the script of the organisers. They beat Paris Saint-Germain, yes, all conquering Paris Saint-Germain by 3-0 in a game that's not ended very long ago. And it was a real football match, 81,000 people there, including Donald Trump sitting next to Gianni Infantino. More about that later. And it ended with a punch-up between the players and perhaps a real problem for Luis Enrique. But first, and we will get into the showcasing and the bands and all the rest of it and what it all means this tournament. But let's talk about the football match, Andy, because I don't know if anyone ever practices jiu-jitsu anymore. The martial arts change so quickly these days. But when I was a kid, everybody wanted to do jiu-jitsu. And it's a sport, it's a martial art in which you use the strength of your opponent against them. I know, it doesn't sound right, does it? And I thought in that first half, allowing for the fact that Robert Sanchez had a very good game as well, Chelsea really did exactly that to Paris Saint-Germain. They outpressed Paris Saint-Germain, the thing that they have been doing against everybody else, overrunning the pressing game. Chelsea are brilliant at it. And then, of course, they've got enough talent in people like Cole Palmer to take advantage of the possession they won.
Yes, that's true. I think if we look at where Chelsea really stood a chance going into this final, and yes, I said it on a recorded podcast on Friday, so it's not like I'm just saying it off the back of the result.
You're right so often. I presume that you record 3 different podcasts and put out the one where you're right after the event.
You know what? I'll start doing that in future. I think that could be the way forward. Look, I think if there was a way that Chelsea were going to win this, it's by doing exactly what all the Premier League clubs who've caused PSG problems in the last 6 months have done. I think despite the fact that they got the better of Arsenal in the semi-final of the Champions League, that they got the better of Aston Villa in the quarter-final, that they got past Liverpool on penalties, you have to say that in a year that Paris Saint-Germain have dominated so far, it's the English clubs that have given them the biggest trouble. Now, you might say, okay, financially, there are reasons for that. I think where the Premier League has come to dominate so much in recent years is the fact that they've been able to buy the best coaches. Now, Enzo Maresca maybe doesn't quite belong to the elite coaches yet. I think this would be a card to say he's on his way, to say he's certainly learning and learning fast, especially when he's been under immense pressure for results under the last couple of months. And there have been parts of the Chelsea fan base that have doubted him. I'm sure there have been people in the boardroom at Stamford Bridge that have doubted him as well. For him to produce something like this and to get his team to produce something like this after such a physically and emotionally taxing season is impressive. It felt like a game too much for PSG, and it felt like a game too much against Premier League opposition for PSG to me, because there are not many teams who would be able to do what Chelsea did. They were smart, but they were also very young and very fit. I thought that made a massive difference. And if we're talking about it being a little step too far for PSG as well, they've been playing pretty much the same side for all of this Club World Cup. Very few changes by Luis Enrique after a very long season. That was a calculated gamble by him. Against Premier League opposition, I guess you have to ask whether it was the right gamble. I mean, you look at the bench and maybe he doesn't have much option as things stand at the moment. And, no one's really pleading poverty for PSG. Of course, they're very, very well resourced. There's no doubt about that. But I thought the things that made a difference this evening is having no real backup for Vitinha. And really, I think they could have done with a more orthodox defensive midfielder in there, because that was really where Cole Palmer was able to make hay. And the other thing is those two defenders, and especially William Pacho, getting sent off in the quarter-final against Bayern and not being able to be there. Of course, Pacho and Luka Hernandez going back to France before even the semi-final, which I think is a sensible thing in terms of preparing for next season. But Pacho in particular, who was so important, and actually in that second leg at Aston Villa, where they were getting absolutely battered for about 25 minutes in the quarterfinal, Pacho was the one who just about held it together, even though he had one of his poorer games of the season. So I think it would have been easy to see PSG get over the line here and think, how do you improve this team? I think this really underlines the depth that they need and where they might need to improve for next season.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we should make the point here, at least I'm going to make the point, that their next proper fixture, Paris Saint-Germain, is against another Premier League team in Udine. In about 4 weeks' time, they take on Spurs in the Super Cup. So I'm afraid that the Premier League keep coming at them, although this is the 17th best team in the Premier League on current form that they're taking on. Chelsea, look, you can... The way they spend their money, how they got through the financial fair play hoops and all the rest of it, that's not for this. We've talked about this a dozen times on the programme. Their players were terrific tonight, and you're absolutely right, Andy. In conditions that, unusual to them, their physical running power and their youth, I think, saw them compete at a level that Paris Saint-Germain struggled with.
Yeah, and they were great all over. And I think if you go back to the last time they dominated Europe, when they won the Champions League under Tuchel, it was a really similar recipe, actually. The physical power of that Chelsea team in the last 6 months of that season under Tuchel was outstanding. That's how they won that Champions League, and that's how they've ended up winning this trophy tonight. Thoroughly deserved, of course. And Cole Palmer, again, really, really outstanding. You talked about your sunburn from this afternoon. He looked like he was getting sunburnt while the game was going on, Cole Palmer, and yet still managed to find those spaces. Now, it's really interesting to me, that fact that Vitinha, who has been, I think, one of the candidates for the Ballon d'Or, I don't think it's unreasonable to say.
It's been terrific, of course.
It will probably be Ousmane Dembele still, and I don't have any massive problem with that in a year where the field's been quite open. And, I don't think this is the point of football or anything like that. The point of football is winning, and, Chelsea have got there and they deserve it. But I think if we're looking at ways of improving a team that we all felt after the Champions League final we're going to dominate Europe for years to come, and maybe them and Barcelona, financial issues notwithstanding, which we have to add as a caveat every time we talk about Barcelona, could be the two teams that will really dominate European football for the next couple of years. This was an underlining that PSG are not perfect, and actually there is a degree of risk in playing with a defensive midfielder that's not really a defensive midfielder when you dominate by controlling the ball. And there's more than one way to win a football match.
Yeah, and it's also an example, as you rightly pointed out, that they made great play of the fact that on their way to winning the Champions League, they had taken out one after another the cream of the Premier League. The trouble with the Premier League is there's a lot of cream and it keeps on coming. And Chelsea have already re-upped from the team that was in the Premier League last year. We've seen the big Premier League clubs spending plenty of money already to improve their teams. Christian Wirtz turning out Liverpool is the most obvious example. Andy, so congratulations to Chelsea. And one thing I always like to say, my love in football is great players. My pet hate is injuries when, even if it had nothing to do with my club, to see Reece James getting the trophy was really a joy, I think, because I think he's a brilliant footballer. But his last 3 years has been absolutely blighted with injuries. So great to see him pick up the trophy.
Agree.
And the game ended in what can be described as if you're Scottish, a stramash. Let's call it a fracas and pretend we're French. A punch-up. And at the centre, the players were really going for each other. It was a bit, I thought, following the sending off, all PSG's players were a bit babyish. There's a ways to lose a match. But Luis Enrique lost his head completely, the manager of PSG.
He really did, grabbing João Pedro in the face. And this could have serious repercussions. Now, of course, it would not be a great surprise to anyone if FIFA were to issue a ban that also covered not only FIFA tournaments, but a more sort of global ban, if you like, that banned him from the touchline for a period of time. I think is fair to say, rather than just a couple of matches, because you don't expect to see something like that from a head coach. Of course, you had a similar situation with Paulo Fonseca at Lyon, where he didn't actually lay a hand on the referee.
No, it's it's the physical involvement that looks so unusual here.
Yes, that's right. And so you already have a situation where one of the biggest clubs in France have their coach banned from everything but UEFA games because he's banned domestically. The similar thing, given that there's this standoff between FIFA and UEFA at the moment. We know that Alexander Cheferin hasn't been to any of the games in the Club World Cup and has completely refused to engage with it.
We'll get on to that in 15 minutes and about what this Club World Cup is really about, but yes.
Yeah, so maybe we have the situation at the start of next season where Luis Enrique, like Paulo Fonseca, is banned from all the games apart from the UEFA ones.
Mad, isn't it? Absolutely mad. But if you haven't seen the scenes at the end of the game, I'd say it's quite unusual. You don't usually see the managers manhandling the opposition players. And now, of course, we don't know what's going on between all the individual human beings. But I think if you're a person of the standing of Luis Enrique in the game, if you're the coach of one of the champions of Europe, you cannot be grabbing the opposition players by the face. João Pedro, of course, made sure he's professional football. Of course, he made the most of it, as they say. But it really was Enrique's fault, and I'm surprised that maybe they were surprised. The Paris players needed to get involved. Donnarumma was very close to it. I know he was also very emotional at the end, but he was big enough to drag the manager away, and perhaps he should have done that a bit earlier. Now, listen, we'll come back to the Club World Cup in about 15 minutes' time. Because I want to talk about what it all meant and how it all went. We'll also use it to try and predict what the World Cup in the United States, Canada and Mexico might look like in just a year's time now. But don't forget, there's other big games today at the same time as the World Club Championship. And there's another reason why I think we've got to talk about it. But the Women's Euros reached the end of the group stages. A resounding victory for England over a, how should we put it, learning Wales team. We'll talk about that and the next stages of the tournament in just a few seconds' time with Uma Gurav. Yeah, welcome back to this slightly later and stranger version of Trans-Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, him, Andy Bressel. As I was saying, along with the Club World Cup, big games tonight in the Women's Euros. And earlier tonight, England secured their place in the quarter-finals of the tournament, beating Wales by 6-1. Here's how it sounded on talkSPORT 2.
Foul by Jones, right on the edge of the Wales box. England free kick.
Yeah, I thought it was very tight to actually being a penalty. That must have been very close.
And the referee has signalled that it's a penalty for England. Here she goes, right-footed, and she drills it into the bottom corner. You can always rely on Georgia Stanway in an England shirt. Toon off the line, Toon again, tucks it in, 2-0 to England. Toon drills the ball into the back post, Hemp is there, and it's got in for 3 for England. She's in behind all the time in the world. Rousseau! There she is to tap it in. Champagne football from the defending champions. Lead, lovely twist and turn. Oh, what a good finish. That's a piece of brilliance from Beth Mead. Reached the edge of the area. That's a lovely way to pass. Oh, brilliant goal. Hannah Kane for Wales. And Wales at least do have something to celebrate. England coming forward now with Mead. Inside right channel. Beaver Jones in the middle of the back post. Here she is. Yes, 6 for England. What a night for Serena Wiegmann and the Lionesses. Into the quarter-finals and in style. Everybody's in on the act. It is 6-1 against Wales.
Yeah, 6-1. Joining us now and bringing us her knowledge and enthusiasm throughout the tournament, I'd like to say Uma Gurev. Hi, Uma.
Hello. Yeah, I'm definitely enthusiastic tonight. Oh, what a result that was.
Listen, we'll get on to the quarterfinals, what they might bring us in a while. But we should talk about this game, of course, because England, after a stuttering start, you can tell us how brilliant they were tonight, albeit against a Welsh side that, how can we put it, are learning at this level.
Yeah, does anyone remember when we were doubting England after they lost to France? It seems like that was just a million years ago, doesn't it? And now look at them go. I feel like, as you say, I think Wales, they have struggled at times during this tournament, and it is their first major tournament. They're the lowest ranked team here, and I think it showed tonight, unfortunately. I just think they struggled to really put on their best performance against England. England were given far too much space. I think they were given far too much respect by Wales. And ultimately, even though Wales did get that consolation goal, and it was a fabulous goal, by the way, for Wales, I think possibly the best goal of the night actually was Wales's goal. But I think for England, they never really got into the top gears that we've seen them reach at major tournaments in the past, and yet they've managed to pull off a fantastic result. So yeah, honestly now, looking at England, they're going to avoid Spain up until the final, we know now. And really, there is, I think, such a strong possibility that they're going to go on all the way and defend this title. I think they can do it. And
there was that little moment, actually, Uma, at half-time where France were losing to the Netherlands. Quite a surprise. Of course, they turned that around, which means that England played Sweden rather than Germany in the next round. I mean, has this actually all worked out okay?
Yeah, tentatively, you kind of want to say, actually, we've got the more favourable side of the draw. I say tentatively because actually, when you looked at the matchup between Sweden and Germany yesterday, Germany were just nowhere to be seen in that game, and Sweden were outstanding. And I think, you know, England won't go into this match against Sweden thinking, oh, this is the easier game of the two. They'll think it's a different kind of challenge, and it is, because Sweden are a fantastic team. They're a team who've won the Euros before, granted not since 1984, I believe was their last one. And since then, they've been that team who are always the bridesmaid, never quite able to get their hands on the trophy again. But they do seem to be clicking at the right time, I have to say, at Euro 25. And I think they will pose a very different threat, because the last time, of course, we met Sweden at a major tournament was when we beat them on the way to the 2022 title at Bramall Lane, that 4-0 win. Alessia Russo scored a famous backheel goal. You might remember it, of course. It was absolutely outstanding, and Sweden just didn't put up a fight that day. They're a very different team now, and so are England. So I wouldn't expect that kind of result. However, I do think England will back themselves to get past this, and then hopefully after that, they'll be up against either Norway or Italy, we know, and they should back themselves to get past those teams as well.
So who are the, well, I'm loving your enthusiasm and the certainty that, near certainty that England are going to retain their title. Obviously Spain. Anybody else who you think on the other side of the draw, if they come up against them in the final, could be a real stumbling block?
Yeah, I think actually we're looking back to the start and we're looking at France again. And hopefully England, if they do come up against France again, can face those demons and not get, I think, kind of too psyched out by the fact that they had that first game and they were so utterly beaten, I think, by France. But whoever comes through that France and Germany game, I think would be the other big contender in this. We know that both France and Germany came into this as favourites. Germany have really struggled, and I think it was a real loss for them. Unfortunately, their captain, Julia Gwynn, she suffered an MCL injury in their very first game. That's absolutely gutting for her, and I think Germany have struggled as a result. Obviously, they picked up a red card in the game yesterday, so unlike themselves. But we know very well the challenge that Germany pose. We seem to meet them every single major tournament we go to, and as you said at half-time, when the Netherlands were winning, I was thinking, oh gosh, it's written in the stars, we're going to meet Germany again. As it is, we won't meet them yet, but I think France, Germany, Spain, those are the three big ones. Spain, I'd be really surprised if Switzerland managed to do anything to stop Spain getting past them. They'll obviously have the home support, but when you watch Spain at this tournament, you just think they're unbeatable, unless, of course, they're going up against England.
What's been the difference between that performance against France and the two that's followed it, Uma? I mean, with my untrained eye in the women's game, and I'm open about this, I'm trying to learning from people like you, it seems to me that between the first game and different level of opposition, the team managed to find the forward players with greater fluidity, and England's forward players are so good that the result then becomes inevitable. Whereas they couldn't find them against France, they were finding them with much more facility against Netherlands and, of course, against Wales tonight.
Yeah, and I think part of that the way that they've been reaching the forward players is through the midfield, and I actually think that was the biggest thing that England just didn't have in that game against France. England's midfield is one of the best in the game when they are able to play to their best. Keira Walsh, we talk about her so much, she's such a good player. Georgia Stanway, Ella Toone, Lauren James, those players, I think, they're the nucleus of this England squad. And I think what France did really well is they just marked those players out of the game at times. We didn't see England's midfield at all during the France game. They just weren't there. And I think the Netherlands didn't really deal with the threat very well. Wales definitely didn't deal with that threat very well at all. So those kind of players have been able to come into the game. Keira Walsh has been outstanding the last two games. She was awarded the player of the match in the stadium tonight. In real terms, the only actual difference between that France game, of course, was that Ella Toone came on for Beth Mead, so she was in the starting lineup. And the other thing that Sarina Wiegman, I think, very smartly did is she switched Jess Carter and Alex Greenwood. So while Alex Greenwood had started the France game as centre-back, it was Jess Carter who started at centre-back and Alex Greenwood went into left-back. That's Alex Greenwood's preferred position, and you could see why tonight. She was causing so many problems down that left-hand side. I expect Sarina Wiegman to stick with that. And I think also, other than just the personnel and the strategy, England just looked so much more confident and free in the last two games. And I hope that they can carry that through the tournament, because that's when they play at their best.
So you talked about Spain coming up against Switzerland. Obviously, there's a class gap, but obviously we're talking about a team playing against the host. If Switzerland could make the unthinkable happen, Uma, how does this open up this tournament?
Oh, they'd be doing us a massive favour, wouldn't they? And also pulling off, I think, the result of the century, perhaps. But yeah, I think it would open up immensely, because already we've got the game with Norway and Italy, where I think neither of those teams were expected to go very deep in this tournament. Norway, I think, were lucky that they were in a very open group. Italy, I think, stunned a lot of people because Belgium and Portugal were perhaps stronger teams heading into the tournament, but they've managed to get through. If Spain are out of this, England, I think, are easily the strongest team left in this tournament. But then obviously they're facing quite a tough draw in Sweden. So we could be seeing some really interesting results. If Switzerland can get through and then they meet up even with England or with Sweden, either of those matches is going to draw a huge crowd. And, you know, I don't want to count Switzerland out, because the support out here has been fantastic. The fans are getting behind it so much. I was in the fan park when they got through to the knockout stages, and I think the locals were going to party all night, honestly. And it has to be said, the last two Euros, the home team has won both of them, the Women's Euros. We, of course, won it in 22, and in 2017 it was the Netherlands. I'm not saying there's a pattern developing, because I'd be very surprised if Switzerland went all the way, but there's certainly something in the air, isn't it?
Yes, well, what you're seeing now, or predicting for us, Uma, is an incredible fortnight for the James family. We've just seen Reece pick up the Club World Cup, and his sister could be central to, she's such a fantastic player as well. If England go all the way, that would be a family double. It may get replicated one day, but it certainly has been replicated so far. Listen, as always, thank you very much. And keep with us here on Trans-Europe Express because, as I say, your enthusiasm is infectious, but your knowledge is what we really, really need. Thanks very much indeed. Uma Garav there, bringing us all the latest from the Women's Euros. Let me remind you of those quarter-finals. On Wednesday, it is the one between the teams who, as Uma said, were surprisingly qualified, Norway and Italy. On Thursday, the big one for England, they play Sweden, who did so well against Germany. On Friday, you've got the game between Spain, some people's favourites, and Switzerland, the host. And then a very big game on Saturday, France take on Germany. talkSPORT will keep you across every one of those games as we head towards the final, hopefully for England. And commiserations to Wales too. I would say that they really were on a learning mission, and hopefully that will help improve their team in the medium term. You listen to Trans-Europe Express. Next, we'll be turning back to the Club World Championship, where Chelsea have just thrashed Paris Saint-Germain. We'll be talking about the tournament in the round. What does it all mean? How did it all go? You listen to Trans-Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and him, Andy Purcell. You are the listening millions. I presume you're still out there because of the change in our starting time, and that's the way it should be. Yes, so we've had the final of the new format of the Club World Cup. Huge tournament in a strange part of the year, you might think. Chelsea have won it, so congratulations to them. But there's so much more to talk about here rather than just the actual games itself. Now, let's not kid ourselves. There were some very big crowds, there were some very small crowds. all kinds of things going on. But and if you don't mind, I'll start with some thoughts about the tournament. And now, look, the basis of this is not crying about European football, because there is no reason on God's green earth why Europe should dominate the game. It has done for a very long time, but there's no reason why that should continue. But equally, once you've said that, I think you have to talk about what the evidence for your own eyes is showing. And the sight of Gianni Infantino and Donald Trump sat there together like two kings overseeing their kingdom during that final reminded me that, of course, what we're seeing here is something of a power grab. FIFA can't stand that UEFA's tournament is the biggest in the world and that Europe dominates the football. America understands that they must get some of this. If you look at all the American owners in the Premier League, they understand it is still the greatest and biggest game on the globe, and they need to get involved with that as well. Hence Donald Trump being so keen on this and the upcoming World Cup. And of course, the whole thing was financed directly and indirectly by Saudi Arabia, who, as you've seen in the cases of golf and boxing, when they see a large sporting organisation and a huge pot of money that they're not involved in, are prepared to move heaven and earth to get involved. None of which is illegal or anything like that. I'm just saying that's what we were watching. That's why, Andy, first and foremost, and I'd love to get your views on what we made of the tournament. I almost cried with laughter when, after all those football matches and all those temperatures and all the controversy, we ended up with two teams from Europe in the final. But even more so, it was absolutely galling for Infantino to watch a Premier League team winning it, because that's the very thing they're trying to avoid, the dominance of Europe as represented by the football and financial power of the Premier League.
Maybe. I mean, I think it's certainly suited the proponents of the Club World Cup that Al Hilal went deep, that Fluminense went deep. It definitely suited to sell it as a purely sporting concept when we know it is more than a sporting concept, and the sport is actually quite a small part of it. Because, as you say, the idea of football being a less Eurocentric thing is undoubtedly positive. I don't think any of us can argue with that. I think it's just about where it's placed in the calendar, the fact that FIFA and UEFA aren't working together to make it better for the players and for the public. And as I keep saying, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I think it deserves repeating, because people will listen to this when we talk about player workload and think, well, they're really well paid, they should just suck it up. The fact is that we as fans, by our TV subscriptions, by what we pay to get into stadiums, by the time that we spend on the game, are not getting a better product. We're getting more product. We are getting a weaker product as time goes by. I don't think there's any doubt about that, because the players simply can't give any more. And as excellently as Chelsea did to win this, I think there's still signs of that in this game tonight. There's no doubt about that. In terms of what you were saying about the politicization of football in this way, I mean, look, I don't think that image, obviously, of Donald Trump still being in the middle of the Chelsea players as Chelsea lift the World Cup, obviously that's something that none of us missed. But on the other hand, that is not something particular to this Club World Cup.
No, we saw the presentation for the World Cup. Yeah,
you look at 2022, you look at 2018, when everyone's getting soaked apart from Vladimir Putin standing under his umbrella. You know, I'm not even forgetting the 1978 World Cup. You know, this is something people who want to argue that sport is not political are welcome to, but they are wrong.
You're right to mention 78 and General Videla essentially presenting the World Cup to himself. In Argentina, extraordinary.
Yeah, and there are enough examples of this to tell us that it is not a new thing. I think the thing that concerns me the most really is the fact that FIFPro, when FIFA have announced that they've been talking about how players get a minimum of 3 weeks holiday. And again, this affects the product that we see. This affects the value that we get for our money and time when we're as invested in football as we are. The fact that FIFPro, the World Players Union, were not involved in this is extraordinary to me. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be extraordinary to me, but I think that is something that is very short-sighted and is pushing football towards a breaking point.
I did the mathematics because I'm not a great mathematician, so I used a calculator. The 3 weeks off means that we, and look, for the rest of the season then, they're playing, training or recovering. That's work, okay? We are, all of us work hard, you more than me, but that 3 weeks off that FIFA come up with on behalf of the players who were not there in the meeting means that they expect the players to work 94.25% of the year. I mean, it's crazy. Not just because I know lots of people work very, very hard and long hours and very little holidays and all the rest of it. But given what we're expecting these footballers to do physically, it just doesn't make any sense.
No one's a winner from it. No one's a winner from it, apart from the people who are getting the product on the pitch.
Yeah. And as you say, TV companies and all the rest of it. Although I managed to watch I watched plenty of the games. It's my job, but I watched plenty of the games on DAZN. Let's not mess about with it. I did not upgrade those, so I watched them in a sort of 1980s fuzz because it wasn't in super high definition. And I've learned that on my very big telly, that can be the fuzz is very big. It was an interesting experience. Infantino then at FIFA's new offices in Trump Tower in New York. Now they haven't given up their old offices. They've now got an American office, and presumably that's okay because the World Cup is going to be central.
More than one American office. They've got them in Miami and somewhere else as well.
Yeah, and the upcoming World Cup, that's probably a good thing that they're closer to one of the three hosts. But when he made his speech on the eve of the final about what a huge success the tournament had been. Again, we live, I admit, in a society now where you can say anything and people will buy it. Post-truth, people call it. But when he said, he talked about the tournament being a huge success, he mentioned revenue only, the amount of money that it's made. And of course, a lot of this was given to it by the host broadcaster. There was very little, if any, I think, mention of the quality of the football or the glorious games that there was. He skipped over those games where nobody turned up to watch them. And also, he was very proud.
Beat some amateurs 10-0.
He was very proud of some of the big crowds. But don't forget, those were done with dynamic pricing now, which has its own evils if it's the Champions League final or something like that. But of course, it meant that by the time some of these big games were 2 hours away, you could buy tickets for $10 and in one case $8. So these were more casual fans. I'm delighted people can see a top football match for $8. I really am. Would that the Premier League was like that. But it was his speech on, I think it was Friday actually, it wasn't on the eve, it was Friday. I thought it was a masterpiece of picking out the bits of evidence that suited your argument with no regard for the rest of the consequences of the tournament.
No, there's no context there, and there's no sense of really does it make football any richer or poorer in a value rather than price sense, I suppose, which is really what we should be looking at. I mean, the dynamic pricing thing is interesting, Danny, especially in a US context. Now, as you know, I have a passing interest, at least in US sport, and I guess the difference in terms of the pricing, it's a bit like going to see, certainly in old money when they were sharing the same stadium, the Lakers and the Clippers in LA. The fact that price reflects demand and reflects public enthusiasm. And the fact is, deep into the competition, you've been able to get tickets dirt cheap, which is something that cannot be ducked. I mean, great for the people who took advantage of that. But if the people are able to take advantage of that, It's because they're desperate to sell the tickets. It's not because it's enormously successful, and it's not because it's filling up. And of course, like, part of that, of course, is to do with different time zones, different times. The fact that
games were played on weekdays during working hours. I think there's quite a few of them. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, we felt that with Chelsea's first game against Los Angeles FC, didn't we? Right at the beginning in Atlanta, I think it was, wasn't it? That was certainly the case. But look, I mean, I think as a concept removed from context, there's a lot to recommend the Club World Cup. And just like there were bits of the Club World Cup that were very, very good, there clearly needs to be greater unity within football. Certainly to back a situation where we get the best possible spectacle, really, and the best for our money, all of us.
Yeah, my thoughts about that. And of course, a brilliant World Club Championship in the right place at the right time would be a fantastic thing. I'm
Agreed.
not sure this was it.
Agreed.
What I can say, and I don't have a solution here, just the problem is that you cannot have the current proliferation of tournaments and expect the players to and the fans. I mean, it's television overload. Let's not kid us. Nobody likes football more than me. Maybe you, Andy. But you can't watch all the games. It's just, you'd have no life left at all, even if you do it for a living. There's so much football now, and I think. But of course, all of that runs directly contrary to the needs of television companies and all the rest of it to keep on pouring this stuff into our eyes. We sound like two grumpy old men here. We're not. We're trying to point out that if we want the best football for the most people, we can't go on as we are. Now, the other thing that this tournament did was perhaps give us some clues, maybe none, to what the World Cup, just a year away now, largely in the United States, but also in Mexico and Canada. We'll talk about that, what we have learned or not, or failed to learn from this tournament that might be applied on the global stage for international football in 12 months' time. That's next. Yeah, the award-winning White and Jordan from 10 o'clock tomorrow here on talkSPORT. And I'll be sitting in for Jim White on Wednesday and Thursday. I'm actually going to make a state visit to London. You may come and greet me at the airport. On the Thursday, The programme will be centred around the press conference leading up to that huge fight between Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois. We will be talking to both the fighters during the course of that show between 10 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As you heard there on the other advert, you can see that on DAZN as well. Andy, so we've had the Club World Cup in the United States. We're seeing a lot of big football in the United States the last few weeks. And the World Cup is coming as well. I make the point, as I always do, that it's actually in 3 countries, soon to be surpassed by an upcoming World Cup in 5 countries, but 3 at the moment, Mexico, Canada and the United States. From what we saw, and you were out there experiencing it as well, which I think is really important that we have somebody on there who went to the Club World Cup at some stage. What do you think we can extrapolate into next summer and the World Cup in the United States?
Well, look, I think straight off, we're going to have to address the elephant in the room. And that's the guy who the Chelsea players were asking to move when he was in the middle of the celebrations. And I think so much of what the US, and they are the major part of next summer's World Cup.
That is exactly right.
There is a subordinate role, and obviously not just for size and infrastructure as well as political reasons, for Canada and Mexico, which hopefully I'll see at least one of as well next summer. But the fact is, when I spoke to people in the US and you asked them, are you looking forward to the World Cup? Some said yes. As an American soccer fan, I'm very much looking forward to the World Cup.
Sure.
Others said, you know what, I don't know what the answer is, because at the moment, the political situation is so fragile in the US. It's so unpredictable. You don't know what things are going to be like next week, let alone next year. Now, again, people will say, this is a football tournament. Politics won't matter. It will matter if some of the teams can't get in. And that's the problem we have at the moment. Now, we've had over the last couple of weeks, we've had individual players not be able to get in. The Senegal women's basketball team was turned away, even though Senegal is not on the banned list as stands, or wasn't on the banned list as stood at the time that they were entering the US. So in terms of especially a 48-team World Cup, there are potential hiccups. I don't think we can get away from that.
Let's take the example of that Senegal women's basketball team. Let's transpose that into a football team that the current United States regime, for whatever reason, takes against and says they're not going to let in. We've seen things in the past where, hilariously, I do think, but FIFA law, if you remember, FIFA law is opposed to when you've agreed to stage World Cup, FIFA law overtakes the local national law.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's going to work in the current climate in the United States.
No, I agree. I don't think it is. And when you talk about FIFA, all we have to say UEFA law as well. I remember during the COVID period when we had Euro 2020 in 2021, of course. I remember coming home from Budapest, 10 days in Budapest, covering games out there. And I had to spend 5 days inside the house, quarantining, as you might remember around that time in June, July 2021. I had to explain to my wife and family how I was unable to go to the shop to get a pint of milk, but I could go to Wembley to see Italy versus Austria, which was quite a hard sell, I can tell you, if we're talking about football or subsiding actual national law.
I think your family are pretty used to you, Andy, to be honest. But
yeah, maybe. But yeah, I think that is a question. It doesn't feel like that will happen at this World Cup. The other thing, though, we have to ask, and when we talk about entry, it's not just about players, is it? It's about
fans,
supporters from various places. Now, we've had big hold-ups during this Club World Cup. Now, bear in mind, in terms of travelling supporters, this Club World Cup has been a much smaller scale than we'll get at the actual proper World Cup. Next summer. So you might have seen that Paris Saint-Germain fans were offered a great deal by the clubs, because of course, to try and match the fact that there are loads of people from the Hispanic and Latino communities following Real Madrid. So for the semi-final, they wanted as many fans out there as possible. So PSG did this great deal for their fans that they subsidised. And they said for €500, we'll do you a flight to and from the game in New Jersey. We'll give you a hotel and we'll give you a match ticket for €500, which is a pretty good deal. And quite a few fans took them up on that. Not obviously thousands and thousands, but some fans took them up on that. Now, the idea was, because it was quite a whistle stop, there would be a fast lane to get them through when they arrived at JFK or Newark. I'm not sure which one it was.
Sure.
And yet still, it took so long to get them through customs that most of the PSG fans who were arriving on that club-funded trip or that club-subsidised trip missed the first 30 minutes of the game, first 35 minutes of the game. They came in when it was 3-0 already to PSG. The ones who had to change in Detroit to arrive in New York missed the entire game. Now, we're talking about that being on a very, very small scale. If you have those same policies, and again, we can't know what's going to happen next year. Maybe this is part of the point of the Club World Cup, because it's sitting in the Confederations Cup spot where you sort of go through best practice and you arrive at a better compromise for the World Cup. So we have to say that as well. But if you apply those same principles or similar principles or anywhere near those similar principles for the World Cup next year, it is going to be chaos.
The other thing, I mean, and again, we're not blaming the United States for this because, of course, we had the climate issues in Qatar. I was at the World Cup for for 6 weeks before, during and after the World Cup in Germany in 2006, where it was never less than 90 degrees Fahrenheit any day. But again, we've seen some of these games were absolutely blighted by the temperature or by rain or by humidity. And so in the early stages of the tournament, it was 4 games a day. And people say, well, they should move them into the evenings and all the rest of it. But the television schedules and all the rest of it won't allow for that.
There's no space. There's just no space. There's no way really of doing that, Danny. And I think what we've seen, this is not a United States problem. This is a football problem. And we saw that.
We play our big tournaments in the summer in places where it is, high summer.
Yeah, that's right. And, we saw all the issues in Florida in particular. That is something that will be the case again next year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We can't be having 2.5-hour half times. We can't be having a situation like in the Benfica-Chelsea game, which, by the way, was not only a pain for television spectators, for spectators who were actually there, most of whom left the stadium, of course, with 5 minutes to go. In fact, it affected, as Enzo Maresca pointed out at the time, the integrity of the actual game. Because that was a game where Chelsea were cruising home 1-0 and they ended up going into extra time after that massive break changed things with 5 minutes to go in the game, of course. So these are issues. But I think when we're talking about the timings and there being no space to react to real world events, this is definitely a football problem. This is not any sort of really environmental problem, or it accentuates environmental problems, I think it's fair to say, because when you have these situations, when this is, again, goes back to there being too much football. What happened during COVID, for example, there was no immediate reaction to that because, of course, the